Welcome to this tutorial where we will go over the process of turning two-dimensional contour topography lines into a pancake model in Rhino. For this tutorial, the assumption is that you are starting with contours that are already in their position in the Z direction. So they are planar curves, but each one is at its proper elevation. If you do not have that, if all of your curves are coplanar, all on one level, then there will be another tutorial for you to follow. In order to make the pancake model work well, it's best if you have a boundary around your contours. So instead of having miles and miles of unbounded topography, which you may get, for example, if you bring the contour lines in from a GIS program, I would like you to put a rectangle around a particular area so that maybe you have something like 1,000 feet as opposed to many miles, and then trim off any excess contour lines beyond that box. Once you've done that, we need to determine what the contour interval is. So what's the vertical distance between one line and another line? To do that, click on a line, any one of the topography lines, and then in your Rhino Properties panel, scroll down to where it says Detail. We can see this is an open polyline with 73 points, and Rhino is actually giving us the coordinates for each of those points. So this is a pretty unruly looking number. The reason for this is that this topography actually was taken from a GIS file, and the GIS file positions the topography in its actual location in the world. So it's pretty far from the origin. So our X coordinate before the comma, our Y coordinate before the comma, and then the Z coordinate is in the final position, so that's 316. Then if I click on the next contour, the X, the Y, and then this says 317, and just to check, 318. So from that I would determine a contour interval of 1 foot. The next thing we should do is just improve the quality of the lines so that they make a cleaner model that will be easier to edit. So if I were to click on one of these curves right now, I can see again in my details area that this has 414 points. A short curve has 48 points. So in between 48 points and 414 points, there's probably a nice sweet spot where we could get the curves to have a similar number of points, and it'll actually smooth out some of these zigzags. Now these zigzags are detail about the Earth's surface, and so it may not be desirable to smooth them out too much depending on how close you're zoomed in on your site. But for this example, I'm going to smooth out some of that detail and concentrate more on the macro form of the site rather than the little micro topography. The command I'd like to use is rebuild, and I'm going to go ahead and just rebuild all of the contours on this site with the same number of points. You might want to do something like select shorter curves, for example these curves and these curves over here, and rebuild those with a smaller number of points, and then select longer curves, such as these, and rebuild those with more points. I'm going to go ahead and go into my right view where it's easy for me to select those curves and then deselect the bounding box. Before I use the rebuild command, I'd like to create a new layer for my rebuilt curves, topo rebuilt, and give that a contrasting color. And make that my current layer. Now I'll use the rebuild command. I'm going to set my point count to 60, which is on the lower side. I don't want to delete my input. I do want to create my new objects on my current layer. I'll click Rebuild. And if you zoom in, you'll see the new curve on the red layer and the input curve. So you can see a pretty drastic refining of that geometry, especially on the long contours. On the short contours, the detail stays pretty close to the original. Now I'd like to turn off the original topography, and I will work with my rebuilt curves for the remainder of the exercise. I've placed my bounding box so that its elevation is concurrent with the lowest contour line on this property. I'd like to go ahead and extrude the bounding box up so that it extends to the tallest point of the hill, which is here. So I just need to do a little bit of math, so I determine the lowest location, which is 297, and the highest elevation is 330. And if I subtract those two numbers, I determine that my total elevation change is 33 feet for this site. I would now like to Extrude Curve, select the bounding box, press Enter when done. I want to extrude only on one side. I do not want it to be solid. I do not want to delete the input. And I want to go ahead and extrude 33 feet. So if that went well, I should now have a box that extends from the lowest point of the hill to the highest point of the hill around the perimeter. I do not want this box to have a bottom or a lid. I'm going to move that to the bounding box layer. Incidentally, I have my back faces for objects set to this magenta color, so the front surface always takes the color of the layer, the back face always takes the color magenta. Now would be a good time to save your file. The next thing that we want to do is actually create lines along this surface of the bounding box that intersect with the end points of each of these contour lines. So we are going to use the contour command. I will make bounding box my current layer, contour. Select objects for contours, select the new extruded bounding box. Assign by current layer, join curves, and then my contour base point, select the lowest point of the bounding box. The direction, move along the vertical axis, and then the contour distance, this should be equal to what you determined your contour interval to be. I'm going to use 1. That was the distance between our contours, and hit Enter. Great, and you will notice that a number of new lines, horizontal parallel lines, have been drawn all the way around the perimeter of the box. And if we did the math right, we should see that a line aligns with a contour, and then the next new contour line at the bounding box aligns with the next contour, and so on, from the top to the bottom. I also should check in my right view. Hopefully I don't see weird double lines, but I see just a new blue line that's directly over the top of my red line. If you do see a red line that's either above or below, that means that you did not have your bounding box properly aligned with your lowest contour before you started. Okay, let's go ahead and hide the bounding box itself using the hide command so that I just see this mess of lines. Ultimately, what we would like to do is make a surface out of every single one of these curves and the exterior boundary. In order to do that, we need to create a closed curve that is the intersection between the topography line and the contour line created at that bounding box. So we're going to use the command curve boolean in order to produce those closed curves. Let's make a new layer, and I'm going to call them my pancake curves. Let's give them a color. Make sure to start at the highest point. This is very important. If you start at a low point, I think it's a little bit counterintuitive and you could end up creating all the wrong surfaces. So let's start at our highest point on the hillside, is type the command curve boolean. Select the exterior boundary. I already selected the wrong one. If you select the wrong one, just hit Command or Control to deselect, and then select the contour that intersects that exterior boundary curve. Hit Enter. Click inside of the 2 points so that Rhino will automatically detect the region that is enclosed by these 2 curves. You can see the preview of the region. Hit Enter or Spacebar to accept that, and then when I finish the command, click anywhere on the screen to deselect. If I were to select there, I should get either my closed curve or my original input curve. I noticed that I was working on the wrong layer. I forgot to set pancake curves as my current layer. Let me move this to pancake layer and set pancake layer as my current layer now. There we go. So we repeat that process 33 times. Let's do it again. Enter for curve boolean. Zoom in to select the boundary curve at the intersecting height. Select my contour. Enter. Select a point inside. Enter again to accept that curve. Click anywhere to deselect. Let's do it again. Zoom in to select the boundary curve and my contour curve. Enter to move to the next step in the process. Click to hit the interior region. Click again to accept. Click anywhere to deselect. Now you're going to do that for every single contour in this file. I'm going to work quickly, and as soon as we get around this area, things change a little bit, but until we get there, the process is exactly the same. So go ahead and click away. One thing I find helpful is that you can start to go a little cross-eyed. So as you finish curves, it can be very helpful to hide the ones that you've already done. So we've completed these top 3. Select those top 3, type hide to get them out of the way, and that enables us to move a little bit easier. Okay, I have just reached the point where things change a little bit. Let me hide all of these that I have completed. And I've just reached the point where this contour spans all the way across, which means that this contour intersects the bounding box here, but then we pick that contour up again over here. So the closed polyline needs to include the bounding box and both of these contour lines. So same process, curve boolean. I'll select this line, zoom in to select the line that it intersects, and then if I'm lucky and have done everything correctly, that line will also intersect. Then I select inside the intersection, and I've got it. So the same thing for the next one. It'll be this line here, here, and then select inside, enter, click to deselect. I'm going to recenter my model. I'm starting to find that my pan is kind of unruly. If I select any object and then zoom to selected, it'll recenter my focal point, and that can be very helpful. Okay, I'm almost out of contours on the right side of my model. So I'll show you what happens next. Let's hide these curves, and holding my shift key, select the other curves on this side and hide. Okay, so now what happens is these curves intersect the bounding box, and I actually want to keep all of this as the region that I would like to turn into a surface. So same process, curve boolean, select the curve, select the intersecting contour, and then just make sure to click the region. You could select this part of the intersection or this part, and I just want to make sure that we're selecting this large part. And then keep going, and we're almost there. Okay, when you've finished doing that, go ahead and type show to show everything. Let's turn off the topo rebuilt, and let's turn off the bounding box. And so now what I should have are all of these closed curves that move all the way around and are able to become surfaces. Now would be a good time to save your file. Let's create a new layer, Pancake Surfaces. I will select a color for this layer. First, let's go ahead and make surfaces, which can be found under your Surfaces menu. If you click and hold down the button, Surface from Planar Curves. Select all of the curves. Oh, let's make Pancake Surfaces our current layer. Enter, and great. You should see that all of these surfaces have now been created. Because I have my back faces set to show magenta, I can see that a couple of my surfaces are actually upside down. I'm going to go ahead and flip those surfaces over so that the green sides are showing. If you don't have your back faces set to show a different color, you might not know if your surfaces are upside down. And that would have had to do with the order that I selected the curves. Flip. Great. That's what I want. I want all of the surfaces to show up in the green color. Okay, so now if I look up close at this, this is a whole bunch of floating surfaces that have space, air, in between them. So what I need to do is extrude down the front curve so that it creates a little step that brings it down and intersects with the surface below. So I'm going to say select curves by typing SELCRV, making sure that all of my other layers are turned off except for my pancake curves, and then use the command Extrude Curve. These surfaces, I need to make sure, do I want to go up a foot or down a foot? And I actually want to go down a foot. So my direction is going to be -1. Again, I don't want solid, I don't need to delete my input, so uncheck all of those options, hit enter, and hopefully if that works, I should now have a vertical surface that connects each of these layers to the layer below. And my edges should be continuous. Looks like something funny happened right here. I missed one. Let's see if I can figure out what happened. It appears that I actually missed a contour when I was doing my curve boolean. No problem. Let me turn on my topo rebuilt. There it is. There's the missing contour. I'll turn on my bounding box, and let's go ahead and fix this really quick. So I'll use my curve boolean command. Curve boolean, select that line. Select the bounding box. Let me just check and make sure that I'm not missing anything else. I am. I'm missing its correlated contour on the other side. Hit enter, select anywhere in between to create the region. Great. I want to make sure that that new curve is on my pancake curves layer. And then I will do the surface from planar curves. And then extrude. So let's check our edge, make sure it's continuous this time. Great. And you'll probably notice that we have a little gap here. So what I would like to do is actually give the base of this model some thickness and also close in that gap. So if I go back to my bounding box layer, I'd like to just take this lowest curve And I'm going to extrude this down solid for, let's say, 4 feet so that I can give it a bit of thickness. So I'll say Extrude Curve. This time I'm going to click the solid button and I'll say -4 feet. And you'll notice that it's actually overlapping with my lowest contour, so I want to move it using the Move command, check vertical to control its direction, and then move it down so that it just touches that bottom layer. Okay, let's turn off these other things so I have only my pancake surface, and we're really close to being done here. This would be a good time to save. So what I would like to do is actually union all of it together using the Boolean union command. And then you wait for a few seconds and hopefully find now that this is one object. Let's see, merge all faces is the command. Select this. Rhino's thinking. Great. Previously you may have noticed that I still could see edges between faces along the sides, and now Rhino has gone ahead and made that all one continuous surface, so that looks great. And just to show you, for example, if you were to, say, place a building on this site, and I'll go to my side view and move that box so that it intersects the site. And I wanted to actually cut the earth around that box. I could use my Boolean difference command. Select the surfaces to subtract from would be my new terrain, and to subtract with would be my building, and I could cut a depression in that earth to accommodate the building. Okay, there you go. That's the end of this tutorial. Good luck with your terrain modeling.